The baby would not stop screaming. The birthing room on the second floor of Oakwood smelled of blood, sweat, and boiling linens. Rain battered the shutters in wild, uneven bursts, making the candle flames jump and throw crazed shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Isabella lay half-propped on the soaked sheets, her hair plastered to her cheeks, nightgown torn open at the collar, chest heaving as she tried to catch a breath that never seemed to come. On the floor, abandoned where it had fallen hours earlier, Arthur Harrington's walking cane lay in a crooked pool of drying blood. Downstairs, the house was full. Carriages had arrived all afternoon, wheels grinding up the muddy drive as cousins, in-laws, and opportunistic friends of the late master came to mourn the man and measure the inheritance. Now they sat in the parlor beneath oil portraits of dead Harringtons, listening for footsteps on the stairs, waiting to hear the verdict that would decide the future of Oakwood Plantation. Would Arthur's young Boston wife deliver a miracle heir or a scandal that would stain the family name forever? In the room, the midwife moved quickly, hands practiced, eyes sharp. She had already cut the cord, already wrapped the child in clean linen, but she still hadn't spoken the only words Isabella needed to hear. What color is he?" Isabella gasped, clutching at the older woman's sleeve. "Please, tell me the truth. Don't lie to me." The midwife hesitated, glancing past Isabella's flushed face to the tall figure standing in the darkest corner of the room. Gabriel. His shirt was streaked with someone else's blood, bandage darkening at his shoulder where a bullet had kissed bone hours earlier. His copper-toned skin gleamed with sweat. His hands, those hands that had once carried trays and ledgers, now flexed empty at his sides as he watched the tiny bundle in the midwife's arms as if his life hung on its next breath. Because it did. If the child bore even a trace of his father's hidden heritage, the rope waiting just beyond Oakwood's gates would find Gabriel before sunset, and the young widow on the bed would follow in her own slower, more socially acceptable way. The midwife drew in a sharp breath. Slowly, she peeled back the blanket. "Before we go deeper into this harsh sentence written on 2 human souls, I want to know who is walking beside me tonight." 3 months earlier, Oakwood had looked almost peaceful from a distance. The long drive leading to the mansion wound beneath ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss that swayed like ghostly veils in the humid Georgia breeze. Sunlight filtered through the tangled branches in broken streaks, giving the illusion of beauty, a postcard from a world that refused to admit its own rot. But the closer one came, the more the illusion frayed. The main house, a grand white structure built on the sweat and suffering of others, carried cracks beneath its fresh coat of paint. The veranda sagged slightly. The columns were stained in streaks of yellow where rainwater had carved its slow path downward. On the far edges of the plantation, the slave quarters sat low and dark, their chimneys crooked like bent fingers clawing at the sky. A melody of misery drifted through the cotton fields, the shuffle of bare feet on dry soil, coughs swallowed to avoid punishment, overseers barking orders. And beneath it all, the relentless Georgia heat pressing on skin like a wet blanket. Into this suffocating world, Isabella Harrington had been delivered like a parcel. She arrived wearing a traveling dress of pale lavender silk that clung to her in the humidity. Her gloves were immaculate. Her hair was pinned in the northern style, tight coils, neat and severe, as her mother had insisted. But her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. She looked too pale for the sun, too fragile for the heat, too alive for a place built on silence. Her husband, Arthur Harrington, waited for her on the veranda steps. He was a mountain of a man, his belly stretching the buttons of his waistcoat to their limits. His face was ruddy from decades of whiskey. Thinning blonde hair clung to his scalp in greasy strands. When he smiled, which was rare, his lips curled too far on one side as if pulled by an invisible hook. "Boston sent me a pretty doll," he had said that first day, reaching for her hand with fingers already trembling from drink. Now let's see if you're worth what your father owed. The statement had been her welcome, a price tag placed on a human soul. Inside the house, Arthur's cruelty seeped into every corner. Servants flinched at the sound of his boots. Overseers lowered their eyes when he roared. At night, the halls buzzed with the soft rustle of fleeing footsteps whenever he staggered from room to room in one of his drunken tempers. Isabella learned quickly that Oakwood was not a home. It was a gilded cage, one built for display, for ownership, for dominance. Yet somewhere inside this rotten machine stood a man who did not belong to its architecture of brutality. Gabriel. To outsiders, he was merely the house servant, the man who carried Arthur's ledgers and managed the household staff. But to those who watched closely, there was something unmistakably different about him. He had the bearing of a man used to commands, giving them, not taking them. He moved silently through the house, yet his presence grounded every room he entered. Unlike the other enslaved workers, Gabriel wore tailored coats that fit his tall, powerful frame, his copper-brown skin glowing like burnished bronze under the lamplight. His eyes, sharp, intelligent, steady, held the kind of awareness that could not be taught under chains. They followed every detail. Not out of fear, out of calculation, out of instinct. He knew the weight of silence. He knew the cost of speaking. He knew how to move through the world like a shadow that could think. He also knew the plantation better than Arthur ever had. Every invoice, every missing bag of feed, every corner of the estate that needed reinforcement, every overseer who took a coin more than he was owed, every widow in town waiting for her loan to be repaid. Oakwood ran because Gabriel ran it, and Arthur hated him for it. Isabella noticed none of this at first. She was too lost in misery, too numb from the shock of her new life, too focused on surviving Arthur's unpredictable rage. Her days were lonely, full of forced smiles at visitors she despised and quiet weeping behind locked doors. But at night, when insomnia tied her nerves into knots, she wandered, and she always found her feet pulling her toward the one room in the house that did not feel haunted. The study. The only place Ada, the cook, told her was safe to sit in during storms. The place with a heavy mahogany desk and a wall of books imported from Europe. The place where the faint smell of ink and candle wax somehow eased Isabella's spinning thoughts. The place where Gabriel worked after the household slept. Isabella discovered it by accident. One night, walking softly through the darkened hallways, she heard a faint scratching sound. She followed it to a half-open door and peeked inside. Gabriel sat at the desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, leaning over a ledger illuminated by a single candle. His posture was straight, disciplined. His hand moved with controlled efficiency across the page. But it wasn't the way he worked that caught her breath. It was the book beside him, a thin volume with a familiar green cover, Lord Byron's collected poems. She had left it in the parlor days earlier, convinced Arthur had thrown it away. Yet here it was, opened as if someone had been reading it in stolen minutes between duties. Gabriel looked up when he sensed her presence, surprise tightening his features for a split second before he stood. "Ma'am," he said, inclining his head, "I apologize. I thought the household was asleep." The formality of it, so smooth, so precise, only made her more acutely aware of the strangeness of seeing him here, not balancing a tray, not serving a meal, but reading poetry as though he had been born to it. "You understand Byron?" she asked softly. He didn't flinch, didn't drop his gaze, didn't pretend to be less than he was. "Tho kalatiang noi quan hung lin hon tu do," Gabriel said gently, "and no man can chain the mind unless the mind agrees to kneel." For the first time since her wedding, something inside Isabella stirred. Not desire, not rebellion, but awakening. She saw Arthur's plantation for what it truly was, a stage where power played at civilization while feeding on human bones. And she saw Gabriel for what he truly was, a man forced into bondage but never bent, a man whose strength lived in silence, a man she should never, under any circumstance, be drawn to. Yet she was. That night was the beginning of stolen glances in the hallways, of lingering conversations disguised as requests for assistance, of a fragile, dangerous awareness growing in the spaces between their words. Neither of them spoke their fear aloud. Neither of them dared acknowledge the truth forming quietly, like a storm gathering across the fields. But Oakwood felt it. The house, old and watchful, felt it. And somewhere in the shadows, Arthur Harrington began to feel it too. It happened on a night when the air felt heavy enough to choke a person. A storm had been building since dusk, low clouds pressing against the treetops, the kind of electric stillness that made even the animals restless. Isabella could not sleep. She paced her room, her nerves frayed by the echoes of Arthur's shouting earlier that evening. He had lost yet another bet, broken yet another chair, blamed yet another servant for his empty bottle. When the mansion finally fell silent, Isabella slipped out of her room and moved down the corridor, drawn toward the only place in the house that didn't feel like a coffin. The study, her sanctuary, his workspace, their fragile middle ground. The door was ajar. A thin strip of golden candlelight spilled across the hallway floorboards. She hesitated, for only a breath. Then she stepped inside. Gabriel was there, shoulders hunched over the desk, the faint glow illuminating the hard lines of his jaw. But something was wrong. He wasn't writing. He wasn't reading. He was staring at a set of crumpled papers, hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles whitened. "Gabriel?" she whispered. He jerked slightly, as if yanked out of some dark thought. When he turned toward her, his face smoothed back into its usual controlled stillness. Too quickly. "Isabella," he said softly, "you should not be awake." "Neither should you," she replied, stepping closer. "What is that? Those papers?" His jaw tightened. "Nothing that concerns you." Her breath caught. These past weeks, their conversations had grown warmer, more trusting. He had let her see pieces of him he showed no one. But this shutting down, felt like a wall slamming in her face. "It concerns this house," she said. "That concerns me." Gabriel hesitated, struggling. Then, slowly, he slid the papers across the desk toward her. Isabella unfolded them with trembling fingers. They were gambling slips, IOUs, unpaid loans, all bearing Arthur's name. And at the bottom of the pile, one letter written in Arthur's unmistakable handwriting. "Payment due within 30 days, it said. "If unable to provide the amount, the slave Gabriel will be transferred as collateral." Isabella's stomach dropped. He wagered your life," she whispered. Gabriel nodded once. "He signed the papers today." The room spun. She braced herself against the desk. "How long have you known?" she breathed. "Since supper," Gabriel replied. "He laughed when he told me, said I should enjoy my last days in Georgia." Isabella pressed a hand to her mouth. She thought she had known the extent of Arthur's cruelty, but this was a different monster entirely. This was not drunken rage or petty spite. This was calculated, deliberate destruction. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. "Because there is nothing you can do," he said quietly. "You are trapped as I am trapped, bound by a man who feeds on suffering." "No," she said fiercely, stepping closer. "Don't say that. There must be something." But Gabriel shook his head. "Arthur plans to sell me by the end of the month. He said he grew tired of seeing your softness toward me. He intends to punish us both." The air between them crackled. Not with storm electricity, but with the spark of truth neither of them had named before. Isabella's voice came out in a broken whisper. "He thinks that there is something between us." Gabriel's chest rose and fell. Slowly, tightly, painfully. "There is something between us," he said at last. Silence. A heavy, trembling silence that felt like stepping off a cliff. Isabella's breath hitched. "Gabriel!" He took a step toward her, then stopped. He clenched his fists, drew a ragged breath. "No," he said hoarsely. "We can't. Not now. Not like this." But the boundary was already broken. The space between them thrummed with something charged, undeniable. She reached out, fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. "Please," she whispered. "Show me how to help. Don't shut me out." Gabriel closed his eyes, as if battling a storm inside himself. Then he opened them. "Meet me here tomorrow night," he said quietly. "There is something I need to show you, something that may change everything." Isabella swallowed hard. "What is it?" He shook his head. "If I speak it aloud before I'm ready, it could doom us both." Lightning flashed across the window, illuminating his face. Strong, haunted, already carrying her fate in the lines of his expression. Everything shifted in that moment. The threat, the bond, the danger. Tomorrow night would bind their destinies in ways neither could undo. The storm arrived a day early. By late afternoon, the Georgia sky had turned the color of old pewter. The moss hanging from the oaks outside Isabella's window shifted restlessly, pulled by wind that carried the smell of rain and something sharper underneath, like metal, like the breath before a blade is drawn. She stood at the glass, arms wrapped around herself, watching the first drops spatter the white gravel drive. Gabriel's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "Meet me here tomorrow night. There is something I need to show you, something that may change everything." "Tomorrow," she whispered, but tomorrow had never been guaranteed in this house. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. She flinched, expecting to see Arthur's bulky silhouette in the doorway. Instead, it was Ada, the cook, her dark hands folded in front of her apron, eyes full of a quiet worry she rarely let show. "Miss Isabella," Ada said softly, "you haven't eaten since morning. I brought you a bit of broth." "I'm not hungry," Isabella murmured. "I know," Ada replied gently, "but you must keep your strength. This house, it takes from you whether you eat or not." Isabella turned then, really looked at the older woman, the lines at the corners of her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she carried years of other people's secrets without ever being asked if she wanted to. In that moment, Isabella felt a rush of shame for all the years she had spent in Boston, arguing about slavery over tea and printed pamphlets, never once understanding what it meant to live inside its jaws. "Ada," she asked quietly, "how long have you been here?" "Too long," Ada said, with the barest hint of a sad smile. "Long enough to know that storms on the outside are easier than storms inside these walls." Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled a few seconds later. "Arthur is in town?" Isabella asked. "For now," Ada answered. "He left with Mr. Grimes an hour ago. They were talking about cards and stakes." She hesitated. "And about selling what wasn't earning its keep." Isabella's stomach tightened. "Did they say a name?" Ada's eyes flickered to the door, then back. "No, miss," she said, "but there is only one man in this house who does more than his master and still gets less than a dog." The truth hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Ada stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Whatever you think you can do, child, be careful. Men like Arthur don't give up their chains kindly." Isabella swallowed. "I just want to stop him from destroying everything." "Then don't let him destroy you first," Ada said. "That's how he wins. Even from the grave, if it comes to that." Isabella's breath caught. "What do you mean?" But Ada had already backed toward the door, composure settling over her like a shawl. "I'll leave the broth here," she said. "Storm will be bad tonight. Lock your door." When she left, the room felt bigger and emptier. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bowl of broth until the surface cooled and a thin skin formed on top. Everything is closing in, she thought, on him, on me, on whatever this is between us. She didn't know whether to be more afraid of losing Gabriel or of what it meant that losing him felt like losing part of herself. As the first real sheet of rain hit the windows, she rose, smoothed her dress, and made the one decision that felt solid beneath her feet. Whatever he meant to show her tonight, she would face it by his side. Even if the house fell down around them, even if the world did, the corridors of Oakwood never felt more alive than they did during a storm. Candles guttered in their wall sconces, shadows dancing wildly along the faded wallpaper. The wind pressed and rattled the shutters, turning every gust into a low moan. Somewhere, a window pane vibrated against its brittle latch. A door slammed on another floor, and for a moment Isabella thought it was a gunshot. She moved quickly but carefully, the hem of her dress whispering over the floorboards. The study door came into view at the end of the hall, a narrow band of gold leaking out from underneath it, like a promise. She knocked once, lightly. "It's me," she said. The door opened almost instantly. Gabriel stood there, lamplight catching the lines of tension in his face. He'd changed from his outdoor coat into a clean shirt, the collar slightly open, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The copper tone of his skin seemed warmer, richer in the flickering light. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. Then he stepped aside to let her in, closing the door behind them with quiet finality. "Has he returned?" Gabriel asked. "Not yet," Isabella said. "Ada said he's in town, gambling with Grimes." Gabriel exhaled through his nose. "Then the night belongs to us. For now." For now, two words that had come to define their entire existence. She moved to the desk, eye catching on the items laid out in precise order. Ledgers, folded papers, a small cloth bag tied with string, another, heavier pouch that clinked softly when the wind shifted and brushed against it. "What is all this?" she asked. He came to stand beside her, one hand resting lightly on the desk. "Proof," he said. "Options, and one final choice." "Show me," she whispered. Gabriel opened the first ledger, flipping to a page scribbled in Arthur's messy hand. "These are his debts," he said. "Here is the contract you saw last night, the one that offers me as collateral." He turned to another section, this one in his own careful script. "And here," he continued, "are the accounts he doesn't know about. Money set aside, payments delayed, small sums redirected back from men who overcharged him, thinking he would not notice. I have been gathering what I could." Isabella stared at the numbers, at the neat records that spelled out years of silent resistance. "You've been stealing from him," she realized. "Reclaiming what he stole from others," Gabriel said calmly. "There is enough here to buy passage north for 2 people if it is timed correctly. With help, even 3. Her fingers trembled. "You mean, you had a plan to escape all this time?" "I had a plan to survive," he said. "Whether that meant staying or going depended on what this house became." He paused. "And on what you decided to be." Her throat tightened. "What I decided?" He turned to her then, fully, his gaze open and unflinching. "When you arrived," he said, "I assumed you would become like all the others. Look away. Accept what you were given. Play the role, learn the rules, pretend not to hear the screams." She flinched. "I was wrong," he added quietly. "You stepped between Arthur and the children, between Arthur and Ada, between Arthur and me, more times than you realize." Emotion rose hot in her chest. "And you stepped between him and everyone else long before I ever came here. You kept this place from burning down around us." He inclined his head, accepting the truth without pride. "I did what I could with what little power I had," he said. "But now his power is slipping, his debts are crushing him, and in his desperation he has decided that I am worth more sold than kept." He gestured to the bag tied with string. "I stole this from his private drawer today," he said. It is not money, it's worse. She untied the string with numbed fingers. Inside were folded letters. Not contracts, not IOUs, letters from a doctor in Savannah. Her eyes scanned the first lines. Regarding your condition, no possibility of natural conception, irreparable damage, no viable. Her hand shook. She grabbed another. Unfortunate reality that you will never sire children. A third. No treatment available. I strongly advise you speak with your wife honestly if... The room tilted. He knew, she whispered. He has known. All this time. Yes, Gabriel said, voice flat. Arthur Harrington cannot father a child. Not now, not ever. She felt sick. And yet he talks as though I am the reason, as though I'm the failure. Cruel men rarely let truth trouble their pride, Gabriel replied. She squeezed her eyes shut, waves of humiliation and anger crashing through her. So if I become pregnant, she murmured, more to herself than him, he will know it isn't his. Gabriel's jaw tightened, which means he will know it is mine. The intimacy of that statement, spoken aloud, made her heart stutter. For a moment, there was nothing in the room but the sound of the storm and the drum of her pulse in her ears. Isabella, Gabriel said, his voice softer now, you must understand that my plan, my original plan, was to leave, to slip away, to disappear, to let this place devour itself without me. But then you came, and you changed the equation. How? She whispered. You asked questions, he said. You noticed things. You refused to look away, and without meaning to, you tied your fate to mine. He stepped closer, his presence closing around her like a shield and a test at once. You want to free yourself from him, he continued. You want to end this cruelty and keep these people from being sold like cattle. You want to live a life where you are not a ledger entry or a bargaining chip. Yes, she breathed. Then we have 3 options, he said. None of them clean, none of them easy. He lifted a finger with each one as if laying out pieces on a chessboard. 1. I leave alone. You inherit his ruin when his gambling finally kills him. You survive, perhaps, but not whole. And the people here remain his property until another man comes to claim them. Her chest ached at the thought of Gabriel vanishing into the world without her, of never hearing his voice again, never seeing his steady eyes in this house of liars. 2, he said. We run together. Tonight. Take the money. Disappear into the night. Pray the Underground Railroad has room for us. You would become a fugitive in a land that believes you belong here. I would be hunted twice over, for being stolen property and for corrupting a white woman. She pictured it, the 2 of them running through the dark, hiding in barns, trusting strangers, living in constant fear of the knock at the door that would mean the end. And 3, she whispered. His eyes held hers. 3, he said quietly. We stay. We endure. We use his weaknesses against him. We let his own sins bury him in his bed. And we take what he tried to own and turn it into a refuge instead of a prison. Her breath caught. How? She asked. By playing the roles they gave us, he answered. You as his wife, me as his obedient servant, until the day the world believes it more than he does. She stared at him, the enormity of his suggestion sinking in. Gabriel, she said slowly, you're asking me to remain in hell on purpose. I'm asking you, he replied, whether your hatred for this cage is strong enough to make you want to change it from the inside. Because if all you desire is your own freedom, we can run. But if you desire more than that, if you want to free others, then we must stay and endure. Together. The word together echoed through her. Her knees wanted to give. The storm outside cracked open, thunder rolling so close it rattled the glass. You're speaking as though I have a choice, she whispered. But do I? Does any of this belong to us? For the first time that night, something raw flashed in his eyes, anger, grief, defiance woven together. Our bodies may not be ours, he said. Our time may not be ours. But this, he pressed a hand gently, firmly, against his chest. This heart is mine, and yours is yours. He cannot own what we choose to feel or whom we choose to stand beside. That is the one rebellion he will never understand until it kills him. She stared at his hand over his heart, at the cords of muscle in his forearm, at the scars she knew were there, even if she couldn't see them in this light, at the quiet strength that had held up this house and her sanity for months without thanks. "You speak of hearts," she said, voice trembling. "What does yours feel when you look at me?" The question slipped out before she could swallow it. His fingers flexed against the fabric of his shirt. He drew in a breath that sounded like it hurt. "It feels afraid," he said at last. "Afraid?" Her throat tightened. "Afraid of what will happen to you if anyone sees what I see when you walk into a room," he whispered. "Afraid of the rope they will knot for me. Afraid of the eyes that will turn against you. Afraid of God's silence when they claim his name while spilling our blood." He swallowed hard. "And yet," he continued, "it also feels alive, in ways I thought were beaten out of me years ago. When you read to me, when you argue with me about numbers, when you risk Arthur's wrath for a boy in the kitchen who dropped a plate, my heart remembers that I was born more than property, and that you were born more than a payment on a debt." Her vision blurred. "Gabriel," she whispered, "if I tell you that my heart feels the same, would that condemn us? More than we already are." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of lighter brown in his irises. "The world has already written its verdict," he said softly. "We were condemned the moment we were born into this place. The only question left is whether we accept that verdict, or write our own in the space between their laws." Something broke then, not the kind of break that destroyed, the kind that opened. She reached up, fingertips barely touching his cheek, tracing the faint line of an old scar just beneath his eye, the one Arthur's ring had left 2 summers ago. He closed his eyes at the contact, only for a second, like a man who had forgotten what gentleness felt like. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered. "Of him, of society, of sin, of everything. I want one thing in my life to be something I chose." He opened his eyes again. "What do you choose, Isabella?" he asked. "You," she said. The word hung in the air, simple and earth-shattering. He exhaled like he'd been punched. Lightning flashed again, close enough to flood the room in white for an instant. In that moment, their shadows on the wall merged into one. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to step back. When she didn't, he cupped her face with a tenderness that made her knees weak. "Then I will ask you once more," he murmured, "knowing what this could cost us, knowing the danger, knowing how little mercy this land has for people like us." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Is this truly what you want?" She nodded, a small, fierce motion. "Yes," she breathed, "not as your mistress, not as your owner, as your equal, as much as this broken world allows." His forehead came to rest against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, the storm outside matching the storm inside them, loud, wild, unstoppable. Nothing about this was safe, nothing about it was simple. It did not erase the chains on his wrists or the ring on her finger, but in that fragile space between their hearts, a different law ruled. When he finally kissed her, it was not with the hunger of forbidden passion, but with the reverence of a man touching something sacred. A question, an answer, a promise. The house did not implode. The sky did not split open. The world kept turning. But for them, everything was different. Later, much later, when the candles had burned low and the storm had quieted to a steady rain, they sat together on the floor beside the desk, backs against the wall, fingers loosely intertwined. There was no need to speak of what had passed between them. Words could not touch it. Instead, they spoke of the future in low, practical tones, as if planning the day's meals. "We must be more careful than ever," Gabriel said. "If Arthur suspects even half of what has happened, he will not rest until we are destroyed." "He already suspects," Isabella replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "His eyes say as much, but he has no proof, only his own rage to guide him." "His rage may be enough," Gabriel said. "Men like him do not need evidence to punish, only excuses." She shivered. "Then we must leave," she whispered. "Soon, before he sells you, before my body betrays what we have done." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. At last, he said, "If you are with child, running will be harder, slower, more dangerous." Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, still flat, still innocent of the secret it might soon carry. "If," she repeated softly. "We don't know yet." "No," he agreed. "We don't." Silence settled around them again. Finally, she lifted her head, eyes steady. "Whatever comes," she said, "I will not pretend this never happened. Even if we must lie to the world, I refuse to lie to myself. You are not my sin, Gabriel. You are the one pure thing I have chosen in a life made of bargains." He drew in a shaky breath, eyes glistening. "And you," he said, voice rough, "are the one person who has ever looked at me and seen a man first and a slave second." They sat together until the last candle guttered. By the time Isabella slipped back to her room, the sky in the east was turning the deep indigo that precedes dawn. Her heart was full and shattered at once. The forbidden bond that had started with shared poems and ledgers had become something that tied them together in ways no chain could match. She pressed her palm to the cool window pane and watched the first gray light creep over the fields. Out there, the world would call what they had a crime. In here, between the cracks of a dying empire, it felt like the only true thing either of them had ever known. They did not yet know that life had already taken root inside her. They did not yet know the price they would be asked to pay. But the storm had passed, and a far more dangerous one was on its way. The first sign was small, barely noticeable. A single morning when Isabella woke and felt a strange heaviness low in her abdomen, a nausea that lingered longer than usual, a flutter of dizziness when she stood too quickly. She tried to ignore it, blaming the sleepless night, the storm, the tension coiled inside her like a spring. But the next morning, it happened again, and the morning after that. By the fourth day, she knew. She had memorized the calendar in her mind, the rhythm of her own body, the precise monthly cycle that governed her life long before Georgia, long before Oakwood, long before Gabriel. Isabella stood before her mirror, fingers trembling as she pressed a hand against her still flat belly. "No," she whispered. "Not yet. Please, not yet." But nature cared nothing for timing. A child created in love did not consider the laws of men. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, as if even the walls might witness her fear. She spent the day moving through the house like a ghost, forcing smiles when servants approached, nodding politely at guests she despised, keeping her trembling hands tucked into the fabric of her skirts. Her heart pounded constantly, as if her ribs could not contain the truth growing beneath them. By dusk, Oakwood felt different. Still, watchful, predatory. Arthur had returned from town earlier than expected. She heard him before she saw him, his boots stomping heavily down the hall, his breath thick with whiskey, his curses echoing through the house. He slammed a door, then another. The walls trembled with each impact. He was hunting something, or someone. Gabriel. Her pulse spiked. She hurried toward the study, but halfway down the corridor she froze. Arthur stood at the far end of the hallway, his eyes bloodshot, his face flushed, his white shirt stained with spilled liquor. He leaned heavily on the banister as though the house itself refused to support him, and he was staring directly at her stomach. "Wife," he said, voice slurred but sharp, "you look different." Her hand instinctively moved toward her abdomen before she could stop it. She snatched it away at once. Arthur staggered nearer, squinting, his gaze narrowing to a point so sharp it felt like a blade. "You've been sick in the mornings," he said. "Ada told me. Thought I wouldn't notice." Cold dread slid down her spine. "She was mistaken," Isabella forced out. "It's nothing." "Nothing," Arthur repeated, chuckling darkly. "Women only get nothing twice a month, don't they?" She tried to step past him, but he blocked her path. His breath reeked of whiskey and rot. "You think I'm a fool?" he growled. "Think I don't know my own house?" He leaned close enough for her to feel his spit on her cheek. "You think I don't know my own body?" The blow landed before she saw his hand move. A sharp crack echoed in the hall. Her head snapped to the side. The taste of blood pooled in her mouth. "You're glowing," Arthur hissed. "Women glow when they're carrying." Isabella's heart hammered so violently she feared he might hear it. "Arthur, Shut up." His voice was low, deadly calm. "If there is a child in you, I will know whose it is." Her blood froze solid, because it could never be his. And he knew it. He grabbed her by the wrist, squeezing until her bones ached. "Where is he?" Arthur snarled. "Where's that big black bastard who's been filling your head with stories and your belly with—" He never finished the sentence. Gabriel appeared at the far end of the hall, silent as a shadow. His presence was so sudden and so commanding that Arthur actually flinched. "Let her go," Gabriel said. His voice was low, controlled, but far too steady for a slave speaking to his master. Arthur's lip curled. "You," he spat. "You filthy—" He shoved Isabella aside and stormed toward Gabriel like a rabid animal. Gabriel did not move, not until Arthur raised his hand to strike him. Then Gabriel caught Arthur's wrist mid-air. The sound of bone meeting unyielding strength echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Arthur's face contorted in rage and humiliation. "You dare," he hissed. "You dare touch me in my own house?" Gabriel held his gaze. "I dare protect her." The world seemed to stop. Isabella's breath caught. Arthur's eyes widened in murderous disbelief. Gabriel's grip tightened. For 3 seconds, Oakwood held its breath. Then Arthur tore his hand free, staggering back. "You're dead," he whispered. "Do you hear me? Dead, sold, dragged through the mud, and I'll make her watch." He turned and stormed down the stairs, shouting for the overseer. Isabella stumbled toward Gabriel, shaking. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows about the pregnancy." Gabriel's jaw clenched. "We have to go. Tonight." "He'll kill you," she said. "He'll kill both of us." "He has already decided that," Gabriel replied. "Our only choice now is whether we die running or die kneeling." Terror shot through her like lightning. "Gabriel," she whispered, voice cracking. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want our child to die." He took her by the shoulders, steadying her. "Then listen to me," he said, his voice low but fierce. "Whatever happens next, you do not leave my sight." Footsteps thundered below. Voices rose. The storm outside raged louder. Arthur had unleashed the hounds. The noose had tightened, and the moment of reckoning was only heartbeats away. The storm outside had turned violent enough to shake the windows in their frames. Thunder rolled across the fields like cannon blasts, and each one seemed to echo inside Isabella's chest. Downstairs, Arthur's voice roared above the chaos. "Find him! Bring me that bastard in chains!" Footsteps stampeded across the wooden floors. 3 men, maybe 4. The overseer, 2 field hands, and Arthur crashing through the house like a maddened bull. Oakwood had never felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in, the hallways shrinking with every shouted order. Gabriel grabbed Isabella's hand. "We go now," he said. "But where?" she whispered. "They're everywhere." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He pulled her toward the back staircase that servants used, the one that creaked only on the 7th step, the one Arthur never bothered to climb because it reminded him he was getting old. They moved quickly, quietly. Boom. Another door slammed somewhere below. "You check the pantry. He's not in the stables." Spread out. The voices were getting closer. Gabriel and Isabella descended into the dimly lit corridor leading to the old storage rooms. The air smelled of dust and linen and cedar. Wind howled down the chimney flues, turning each room into a whispering mouth. Isabella clutched the railing with one hand and her abdomen with the other. Her entire body trembled, not with weakness, but with the terrifying awareness that two hearts depended on one man's ability to keep them alive. At the bottom of the stairs, Gabriel paused. Footsteps approached from the left. He pulled her into a small storage room, shutting the door softly behind them. Only moonlight filtered through the slats of the shutter, striping the room in silver. Gabriel leaned close, his breath warm on her air. "We have seconds," he whispered, "not minutes." "Gabriel?" Her voice broke. "If they take you, they won't," he said. "I promised you I would not leave your side." Boots stopped right outside. Isabella's breath hitched. Gabriel's fingers intertwined with hers, anchoring her as the latch rattled. The door handle turned. Gabriel's muscles tensed. The door cracked open. And Ada, the cook, slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her. "Thank the Lord," Ada hissed. "I told them I saw a shadow by the barns. They're running in circles for now, but that won't last." She turned to Isabella, eyes fierce. "Miss, you need to choose this moment. Stay here and you're dead." "Both of you." Gabriel stepped forward. "Ada, thank you." She waved her hand sharply. "Don't thank me yet. Take the back cellar tunnel. It goes past the smokehouse and out toward the creek bed." Isabella blinked. "A tunnel? Why didn't I know about—" "It was dug 20 years ago," Ada said, "when the old master feared slave uprisings. Thought he'd need a secret way out. Funny how white men always prepare for danger they create themselves." She grabbed Isabella's wrist. "Go," she urged, "before Arthur realizes you're gone." But it was already too late. Arthur's voice bellowed down the hall. "Isabella, get out here!" 3 shadows appeared under the door. Gabriel shoved Ada and Isabella behind him. The door burst open with a violent crash. Arthur stood there, breath heaving, face purple with rage, the overseer and 2 men flanking him. His gun was raised before the echoes even faded. "Step away from her," Arthur snarled. Gabriel didn't move. Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. "I said no." The single word cut through the air like steel. Even the storm seemed to pause. Arthur's jaw dropped in disbelief. You dare say no to me?" Gabriel's voice was calm, clear. "You will not touch her." Arthur's laugh was high and sharp, almost hysterical. "Oh, I will touch her," he spat. "I'll cut the truth out of her body and drown Georgia in the blood of your bastard, and then I'll make you watch her die before I have you hanged." Isabella's scream tore from her, raw and primal. "Arthur, please." "Shut up," he bellowed, gun swinging toward her. Gabriel moved. Fast. Faster than any man should have been able to. He lunged forward, knocking Arthur's arm upward just as the gun fired. The bullet tore into the ceiling, raining plastered dust over them. Chaos erupted. The overseer charged at Gabriel from behind. Gabriel spun, grabbing a wooden crate and smashing it into the man's chest, sending him sprawling. One of the field hands tackled Gabriel's legs, but Gabriel drove his knee upward, breaking the man's grip and sending him howling to the floor. Arthur fired again. The bullet grazed Gabriel's shoulder, blood spraying across the wall. "No!" Isabella screamed. Gabriel staggered but stayed standing. Arthur fumbled with the gun, trying to cock the hammer again. His hands trembled from rage and whiskey. Isabella acted before she could think. She snatched the heavy brass candlestick from the shelf beside her and hurled it across the room. It hit Arthur squarely in the side of the head. He stumbled, dazed, giving Gabriel the opening he needed. Gabriel slammed into him, grabbing the pistol and wrenching it free. The gun clattered across the floor. Arthur swung wildly, hitting Gabriel's wounded shoulder. Gabriel grunted but didn't fall. He seized Arthur by the front of his coat and shoved him backward, right into the open cellar door. Arthur toppled down the steep stone steps, limbs flailing. He hit the bottom with a sickening crack. Silence. The overseer groaned on the floor. The other men were either unconscious or bleeding. Only the storm outside dared make a sound. Isabella stood frozen, hands shaking violently. Gabriel touched her cheek. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Gabriel, Arthur, did he—" Gabriel descended the steps slowly. Isabella waited at the top. Seconds stretched like hours. Then Gabriel reappeared, his expression unreadable. "He's gone," he said quietly. His neck snapped when he fell. Isabella let out a choked sob. Not of grief, but of overwhelming release. Of terror suddenly evaporating. Of 4 years of captivity collapsing into dust. Gabriel climbed the final step and pulled her into his arms. "We're free," she whispered against him. He held her tighter. "No," he said. "Not yet. Not in the eyes of the law. We must move carefully. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them he was drunk. They will believe you." "But you?" she asked. "They'll suspect you." Gabriel exhaled. "Then we make sure they don't." The storm began to quiet. The house stood still, and the world, for the first time since she arrived at Oakwood, felt like it was tilting toward the possibility of freedom or the danger of a lie that would shape the rest of their lives. "Come," Gabriel said softly. "There is one more battle left." By noon the next day, the storm had blown itself into exhaustion. Sunlight crept through the clouds in timid slivers, touching the battered house with hesitant warmth. Oakwood looked almost peaceful, if one ignored the shattered furniture, the bloodstains scrubbed from the cellar steps, and the hollow echo Arthur's absence left behind. In the great parlor, neighbors gathered in stiff black coats and somber dresses. Arthur Harrington's body lay in a closed coffin. No one wanted to risk opening it after the fall mangled him beyond recognition. The doctor shook his head sympathetically. "Tragic," he murmured to Isabella. "But not surprising. A drunk man near stairs is a death waiting to happen." She lowered her eyes, allowing her hands to tremble just enough. It all happened so fast. He lost his balance. Gabriel tried to save him, but— the faithful servant," the sheriff said, nodding approvingly. "Good that he was there. These accidents can be worse." Beside him, Gabriel stood silently in a black coat, his wounded shoulder bandaged beneath the fabric. His expression was perfectly composed, respectful, solemn, unreadable. No one suspected a thing. No one saw the truth beneath the mask, just as planned. As mourners drifted out, offering rehearsed condolences and tasteless speculation, Isabella remained at the top of the staircase, one hand resting on the banister Arthur had grabbed so many times in rage. Gabriel joined her only when the last carriage had left. "It's over," she whispered. "For them," Gabriel murmured. "But for us, life begins now." She looked at him, at the strength in his eyes, the quiet resolve that had carried them through hell. Her heart ached with a mixture of love, fear, and gratitude. "Will they question why you stay here?" she asked softly. "They will assume I'm loyal," Gabriel replied. "And they will be right, just not for the reasons they think." Isabella exhaled shakily. "I'm afraid, Gabriel. I am still afraid." He took her hand gently, deliberately, something he could never have done publicly before. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said. "It's choosing what matters more than the fear." Her other hand drifted to her abdomen as if guided. "Then our child will be born into courage," she whispered. For the first time that day, Gabriel allowed himself a real smile. Small, tender, luminous. Weeks passed. Suspicion faded. Rumors died. And Oakwood began to change, not through upheaval, but through quiet, deliberate acts. Nights found Gabriel teaching letters to field hands by lantern light. Days found Isabella easing punishments, adjusting workloads, offering medicine where once there had been only pain. Slowly, imperceptibly, the plantation bent toward something new. Not quite freedom, not yet, but no longer bondage sharpened by cruelty. The house breathed easier. The people moved steadier. Fear loosened its grip. When the baby finally arrived, 2 months after Arthur's accident, Isabella cried the moment she saw him. A boy, fair skin, golden hair, blue eyes, the exact child Arthur could never have given her. Gabriel held his son with a reverence that broke her heart open. "What shall we name him?" she whispered. Gabriel looked at her with quiet certainty. "William," he said, "a name strong enough to carry 2 worlds." Years later, long after the war ended, long after laws changed and chains were broken by force of blood rather than mercy, people would whisper about Oakwood, about the widow who ran the plantation with fairness, about the steward whose wisdom shaped every decision, about the strange, unspoken harmony that hung over the estate, a place that defied the brutality of its own history. No one ever guessed the truth. No one ever knew that the master's heir was born of forbidden love. No one ever suspected that the steward who served the house was the one man the widow trusted with her soul. But every night, when the doors were bolted and the lamps extinguished, one truth belonged to only 3 people. They had survived. They had outwitted a system built to destroy them. They had carved freedom from the very bones of oppression. Not by miracle, not by rebellion, but by love that refused to die. The story is over, but the pain of that era still resonates. How are you feeling right now? Are you listening to this story alone or with someone? Share your feelings and where you are right now.